Today we gather around a truth that cannot be shaken. God is my perfect provider. Provision is not something you have to chase. It is not something you must wrestle for in fear, nor is it something limited by the world's economy. Provision flows directly from the heart of God. He knows what you need before you even ask, and His supply is endless. God does not only give, He gives perfectly. What He provides is always right on time, always sufficient, always abundant, and always aligned with His perfect will for your life. God is the ultimate and perfect source of provision. When we say this, we acknowledge that everything we need for life, growth, and fulfillment comes not from human hands, not from the shifting economies of the world, and not from the fleeting promises of material systems, but from the One who holds all things together. God's supply is not partial, it is not insufficient, and it is never late. His provision is full, complete, and perfectly timed. When a person recognizes this truth deeply, life begins to shift. Fear about tomorrow begins to dissolve. Anxiety about lack begins to lose its grip. Confidence begins to rise, because the foundation of provision is no longer the fragile structures of the world, but the unshakable abundance of God. To call God the ultimate source of provision means that every good thing originates in Him. The food on the table, the roof over one's head, the opportunities that appear at the right moment, the relationships that uplift, the ideas that lead to breakthroughs. All of these are not random, they are expressions of God's provision. He is the fountain from which all streams flow. If you only look at the streams, you may think they are independent, but when you trace them back to their source, you find one eternal wellspring. God is that wellspring. Human channels may change, jobs may end, people may shift, circumstances may close in, but the source remains constant, and because of that, provision is never truly cut off. There is comfort in knowing that God does not provide out of lack or limitation. His storehouses are infinite. The universe itself, vast beyond comprehension, reflects the limitless nature of His supply. If God can scatter the heavens with uncountable stars, if He can fill the oceans with innumerable creatures, if He can keep entire galaxies spinning in order, then surely He can provide for the daily needs of His children. His abundance is not theoretical. It is evident in creation all around us. And if nature is sustained without effort, then humanity, made in His image, will never be overlooked. To say God is the ultimate source is to rest in the truth that you are cared for by the One who designed and sustains all existence. When people forget this truth, they often fall into worry and striving. They work endlessly as if their entire survival depends on their own strength. They chase after wealth as if it is the only way to security. They fear tomorrow because they cannot control it. But when faith rises, and one declares, God is my perfect provider, the pressure shifts. You no longer live as if everything depends on you, but as if everything depends on the One who never fails. This does not mean passivity. It means working with peace, knowing that your efforts are supported by divine supply. It means taking action without fear, for you know the provider is already ahead of you, preparing the way. God's provision is not only about material things. Provision is broader and deeper than money or possessions. True provision is peace when anxiety tries to take over. It is strength in the body when weakness sets in. It is wisdom when confusion clouds judgment. It is open doors when it seems like every opportunity is locked. It is favor in places where skill alone would not have been enough. When you look at provision in this way, you realize God has already been providing for you in countless ways, even in moments when you thought you were lacking. Often people focus on what they do not yet have, and miss the constant flow of provision already at work in their lives. Gratitude awakens the eyes to see how perfectly God has been providing all along. Declaring God as the ultimate and perfect source also protects the heart from idolatry. When you see a person, or an employer, or a business as your source, You place your trust in something that can change. People may leave, jobs may close, businesses may fail, economies may collapse. If your security rests on these, fear will always be near. But if your security rests on God, who is unchanging, then even if channels shift, the source does not. You can release fear because you know that God will simply open another way. This is why testimonies often include phrases like, "I lost one opportunity, but a better one came." That is the provider at work. When one door closes, he opens another, often greater than the first. To fully embrace God as the ultimate source requires trust. Trust is not passive. It is an active choice to lean on God even when circumstances seem contrary. There are times when provision does not appear immediately, and the temptation is to panic. But in those moments, trust holds the heart steady. Trust says, "Though I do not see it yet, I know it is coming." God cannot fail. He has already made a way. This posture of trust invites peace and allows one to continue moving forward in confidence. Faith is the bridge between the promise of provision and the experience of it. Without faith, you will see only scarcity. With faith, you see the unseen supply already on its way. Another layer of understanding comes when you realize that God's provision is perfect, not just abundant. Perfect provision means it fits your need precisely and arrives at the exact right time. Sometimes people think God is late, but later, they realize the timing was flawless. If the provision had come earlier, they may not have been ready to receive it. If it had come in another form, they may not have valued it. Perfect provision means God's wisdom accompanies His giving. He knows not only what you want, but also what you need, and His supply takes both into account. Trusting Him as the perfect provider means surrendering your limited view and embracing His greater wisdom. This truth also transforms the way you pray. Instead of begging as though God is reluctant to give, you begin to thank Him in advance, knowing the provision is already secure. Instead of approaching prayer with desperation, you approach with confidence. You say, "Father, I thank you that you are my source. I thank you that you know my needs before I speak them. I receive what you have already provided." Gratitude aligns the heart with faith, and faith draws the unseen into the seen. This is why prayer seasoned with thanksgiving often results in peace, even before circumstances change, because the heart knows the provider has already answered. To live daily with the awareness that God is the ultimate and perfect source of provision is to live free. Free from fear of tomorrow, free from the trap of comparison, free from the endless chase for more, and free from the lie of scarcity. It is to live in rest, not because life is without challenges, but because the source of life Himself is your supply. It is to walk into each day with the calm assurance that whatever comes, provision will meet you there, for God Himself has promised never to leave nor forsake. And if He is with you, His provision is with you. Provision flows directly from God's heart, and this truth changes the way we see everything in life. When provision is understood not as something random, nor as something earned through sheer human effort, but as a gift from the very heart of God, it takes on a sacred dimension. God's provision is not cold, mechanical, or detached. It is deeply personal, filled with His love, His care, and His intimate knowledge of who we are. He provides not because He must, but because it is His nature to give, to sustain, and to pour out goodness on His children. To believe this is to realize that every blessing is not merely a resource, it is a love letter from God's heart to yours. The heart of God is generous. Throughout creation we see this generosity woven into everything. The sun rises each morning without fail, the rains come to water the earth, the seasons shift in their time, and life continues in abundance. No one plants the forests that grow on mountaintops. No one pays the oceans to sustain their waves, and no one commands the air to fill with oxygen. These are continual provisions flowing from God's heart into the world. If He is so generous in sustaining all of creation, how much more intentional is He in providing for those who are made in His own image? His heart is moved by love, and love always expresses itself in giving. When we begin to see provision as something from God's heart, our perspective changes. We stop viewing resources as scarce, limited, or withheld, and start recognizing them as expressions of divine love. Fear begins to dissolve because lack is not a reflection of God's heart. His heart never runs dry. Human channels may open and close, but the flow itself comes from Him. If one door shuts, it does not mean God's love has stopped. It only means He is redirecting the flow of provision through another channel. The source is unchanging because His heart is constant. It is important to notice that provision from God's heart is not transactional. Human systems often operate on exchange. Work for pay, give to receive, trade to gain. But God's provision is not based on earning. It is based on His nature. That does not mean effort is unimportant, but effort is never the source. Effort becomes a channel through which God's provision flows, but the supply itself is rooted in His heart. This is why some blessings appear in ways we could never have planned. A timely word of encouragement, a surprising opportunity, an unexpected gift. All of these are reminders that God's provision flows from His love, not merely from our calculation. Because provision flows from God's heart, it also carries His wisdom. He provides not only what we think we need, but what He knows is best. There are times when we long for something and do not receive it immediately, and we might think God is withholding. Yet, later, we realize that His timing was perfect, or that He had something better in store. A parent does not give a child everything the child demands, but what the child truly needs at the right time. So, it is with God. His heart does not simply supply. His heart supplies wisely, with foresight that we cannot see. This is why trust is essential. Trust says, even if I do not understand, I know your heart is for me, and therefore your provision is perfect. When we align with this truth, gratitude naturally flows from our lives. Gratitude is the recognition that what we receive is not by accident, but by intention. Every good thing, small or large, becomes a reminder of God's heart in action. Gratitude keeps us connected to that heart, because it shifts our focus away from what we think is missing, and centers it on the love already poured out. A grateful heart sees blessings everywhere, while an ungrateful heart only sees lack. By choosing gratitude, we keep our spirit open to the continual flow of provision, because faith and thanksgiving work hand in hand. This flow from God's heart is not limited to material things. It extends into every dimension of life. When you need peace, His heart provides comfort that quiets the storm within. When you need direction, His heart provides wisdom that illuminates the next step. When you need courage, His heart provides strength that rises within you. When you feel alone, His heart provides companionship, reminding you that you are never forsaken. Each of these provisions is personal, because His heart is personal toward you. The very details of your life matter to Him, and His provision flows with that awareness. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing that provision is impersonal or scarce. This belief leads to fear, competition, and striving. When you think provision is limited, you fight others for it. When you think it is impersonal, you fail to see God's care in it. But when you see provision as flowing from God's heart, there is peace. You realize there is no need for comparison or envy, because the flow for you is unique and designed for your path. What someone else receives does not diminish what is available for you, because God's heart is vast enough to provide for all without depletion. Living with the awareness of provision flowing from God's heart transforms daily life. It allows you to approach work with peace instead of desperation, because you know work is a channel, not the source. It allows you to give freely, because you know giving does not empty you. It connects you even more deeply to the flow of God's heart. It allows you to face uncertainty without fear, because your confidence rests not in circumstances, but in divine love. Every step becomes lighter, because you walk not in the pressure of self-sufficiency, but in the assurance of divine sufficiency. When challenges arise, remembering that provision flows from God's heart keeps hope alive. Circumstances may seem barren, but the provider's heart is never barren. In the wilderness, streams can spring forth. In the desert, manna can fall. In lack, abundance can be revealed. What seems impossible for man is always possible with God, because the source is not the environment, it is His love. And His love is unchanging, unwavering, and eternal. To know that provision flows from God's heart is to rest in the deepest security. It is to live free from the fear of lack, free from the anxiety of tomorrow, and free from the illusion that you are alone. It is to live with the continual assurance that every step of the way, the heart of God is beating for you, providing for you, and sustaining you. This truth is not only comforting, it is empowering. It shifts you from a posture of fear to a posture of faith, from striving to resting, from scarcity to abundance. Everything you need flows from the perfect, generous, and unchanging heart of God. God provides on time, in abundance, and in alignment with His will. This is a truth that brings both peace and confidence to the soul. It reassures us that there is no such thing as God being late, no such thing as God running out, and no such thing as His provision missing the mark. When God provides, it is never half done, never insufficient, and never misaligned with His greater plan for our lives. His timing is flawless, His abundance is limitless, and His will is always for our ultimate good. To live in the awareness of this truth is to live without fear of tomorrow, without anxiety about lack, and without doubt about His faithfulness. The first dimension of this truth is timing. God's provision is always on time. To human eyes it may sometimes appear delayed, but in the wisdom of God, it is right on schedule. Think about the seasons. Spring does not arrive a day too early or too late. The sun does not rise ahead of schedule, and the tide does not flow out of rhythm. Creation itself testifies that divine timing is exact. In the same way, God's provision comes at the very moment it is needed. Often, we grow restless and worry when what we desire does not arrive immediately, but looking back, we realize that had it come earlier, we may not have been ready to receive it. Sometimes the waiting itself prepares us, strengthens our faith, and enlarges our capacity to handle the blessing when it arrives. God is never in a rush, but He is never late. His timing is perfect. And when you learn to trust that, the anxiety of waiting gives way to peace. The second dimension is abundance. God never provides with scarcity. His supply is not rationed or limited by earthly shortages. The same God who multiplied the loaves and fishes to feed a multitude is the God who still provides an overflowing measure today. His giving is not measured by lack, but by His limitless nature. When God opens His hand, He satisfies every living thing. Abundance does not always mean excess in the material sense. It means sufficiency overflowing into peace. It means there is always enough. Not just enough for you, but enough to share, enough to bless others, enough to live generously. When you see God as the God of abundance, you stop living with a scarcity mindset. You stop fearing that there will not be enough, and you begin to live with open hands, knowing that as you give, the flow of provision continues. Abundance also shows us that God provides more than what we think we need. Many times His blessings exceed our expectations. We might pray for a door to open, and He opens several. We might ask for strength to endure, and He gives us not only strength, but joy in the midst of trials. His provision often carries surprises, because His love is extravagant. He does not just meet the need, He adds the overflow that reminds us of His generosity. When we live with this awareness, we learn to expect good from God, to look forward to how He will exceed our expectations. Fear says, what if there is not enough? Faith says, I know there will be more than enough. The third dimension is alignment with His will. This is the most important aspect, because provision without purpose can become a burden rather than a blessing. God provides in alignment with His divine will, ensuring that what He gives moves us toward the destiny He has prepared. Sometimes, what we think is provision is actually distraction, and God withholds it not out of neglect, but out of wisdom. He knows what will bless us and what will harm us. He knows the difference between what we want in the moment and what we truly need for the journey ahead. His provision is not just about satisfying immediate desires, but about shaping us for eternal purposes. When you see provision in this way, you begin to surrender more fully to His will. You stop demanding that God meet every request exactly as you present it, and instead you trust that His answer, whether yes, no, or wait, is always perfect. Provision aligned with His will means you can live with confidence even when prayers seem unanswered, because you know God is not withholding out of indifference, but guiding with wisdom. Every provision you receive in alignment with His will strengthens your character, builds your faith, and keeps you on the path of destiny. Understanding these three dimensions, timing, abundance, and alignment, brings balance to the way you view life. You no longer live in frustration about delays, because you trust His timing. You no longer live in fear of not having enough, because you trust His abundance. You no longer live in confusion about unanswered requests, because you trust His alignment. Each of these truths works together to paint a picture of a provider who knows, who cares, and who acts with perfection. This understanding also transforms the way you pray. Instead of praying from a place of desperation, you pray from a place of faith. You say, "Lord, I know you will provide at the right time in the right way, and in the right measure. I trust your will above my own understanding." Such prayer carries peace, because it is rooted in trust. Anxiety-filled prayer feels like begging, but faith-filled prayer feels like resting in His promises. You begin to pray not to convince God to provide, but to align your heart with His perfect provision that is already assured. Another powerful outcome of this truth is how it affects generosity. When you believe that God provides in abundance, you do not cling tightly to what you have. You know that the flow is ongoing, not you know that giving does not decrease you but connects you even more deeply to the abundance of God. The more you give, the more you realize that His provision is never exhausted. This mindset shifts you from hoarding to sharing, from fear to freedom, from scarcity to overflow. Your life becomes a channel through which God's abundant provision can reach others, and in that process, you experience even more of His faithfulness. The peace that comes from trusting God's provision is not theoretical, it is practical and powerful. It allows you to walk into uncertain seasons with calmness, knowing you will not be abandoned. It allows you to face challenges with courage, knowing that the supply you need will arrive exactly when it should. It allows you to rest at night, even when the future seems unclear, because you know the provider is already preparing the way. This peace is priceless, and it comes only from trusting that God provides on time, in abundance, and in alignment with His will. When you look back over your life, you can often see this truth. At work, moments when you thought you were at the end of your resources, something arrived just in time. Moments when you expected just enough. God gave more than enough. Moments when you prayed for something specific, but He gave you something different, something far better, more lasting, and more aligned with your true purpose. These experiences build faith and remind you that His track record is flawless. If He has provided before, He will provide again, because He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. To live with this awareness is to live in continual assurance. You no longer fear delays, for they are only divine timing. You no longer fear lack, for His abundance cannot be exhausted. You no longer fear missed opportunities, for His will ensures the right ones come to you. Every day becomes a journey of trust, where you expect provision to meet you, not as an accident, but as a promise fulfilled. This is the life of peace, the life of confidence, the life of faith, that comes from knowing God provides on time, in abundance, and in alignment with His will. Dependence on man or worldly systems brings limitations and disappointment. This is a truth that becomes clearer the longer one walks through life. Human beings, no matter how well-meaning, are finite. Systems, no matter how carefully designed, are imperfect. Promises can be broken, governments can collapse, economies can fluctuate, and people can change. When your sense of security is built on these fragile foundations, you will always find yourself vulnerable to fear, stress, and letdowns. But when you recognize the limits of man and the systems of the world, you free yourself from the illusion of control and shift your trust to the only source that cannot fail. People often put their trust in jobs, businesses, or connections, believing these to be the pillars of their survival. They assume that if they work hard enough or secure enough contacts, they will always be safe. Yet, history is full of examples where jobs disappeared overnight, where markets crashed, and where connections that once seemed strong dissolved under pressure. Depending on man or man-made systems is like building a house on sand. It may appear solid for a while, but when the storms of life come, it begins to sink. The disappointment that follows is not because God failed, but because the trust was misplaced. Even in the best of intentions, people are limited. A person may want to help but lack the resources to do so. A company may want to honor its promises, but face circumstances beyond its control. A government may set out to create stability but is always vulnerable to change, unrest, or economic shifts. To place your hope in these fragile entities is to live in constant uncertainty, because they cannot guarantee permanence. At their core, they are temporary structures in a temporary world. This does not mean work, business, or systems are unimportant. They are channels through which provision may flow. But the mistake comes when people confuse the channel with the source. A channel can dry up, but the source is eternal. A channel may shift, but the flow continues. When you put all your dependence on the channel, you feel panic when it closes. But when you trust the source, you recognize that the same God who provided through one channel can provide through another. This mindset frees you from fear, because you know the real provider is not bound by worldly systems. Disappointment is inevitable when you rely fully on man. Expectations, placed too heavily on people, often lead to pain. A friend may promise support and later withdraw. A mentor may guide for a season, but eventually move on. Even family can fail to provide in the way one hopes. Human beings are imperfect and ever-changing, and expecting them to fill the role of ultimate provider will only bring frustration. People can be blessings, but they are not the source of life, and holding them to that standard leads to broken trust. The same is true for worldly systems. An economy may flourish today and collapse tomorrow. Currencies rise and fall. Industries that once dominated become obsolete. Political structures that seem strong one day can be shaken the next. Depending on these for ultimate security is like leaning on a reed. It may hold for a moment, but will eventually bend or break. Systems are tools, not anchors. They can be useful, but they are not infallible. Recognizing the limitations of man and systems does not mean becoming fearful of them, but it means refusing to worship them. It means using them wisely while keeping your ultimate trust in God. When you see them as tools rather than saviors, you handle them with freedom. You can work diligently at your job, but if it ends, you do not collapse in despair. You look to the source for the next opportunity. You can participate in the economy, but when it fluctuates, your peace is not shaken, because your trust is in a higher economy. You can appreciate relationships, but when they shift, you are not destroyed, because your foundation rests on God, who never leaves or forsakes you. This perspective creates resilience. Many people crumble when human help fails them because they built their entire hope on others. But when your foundation is God, disappointments do not destroy you. They redirect you. You learn to see closed doors, not as the end, but as part of the journey. You begin to thank God for the lessons that come with disappointment, because they remind you to shift your trust back to Him. Every moment of human failure can become a divine reminder that the ultimate provision is never in man's hands, but in God's. Dependence on man also creates unnecessary fear of rejection. Many live their lives constantly trying to please others, fearing that if they lose someone's approval, they will lose their provision. This creates chains of control and manipulation, but when you know your provision comes from God, you are free. You no longer live bound to the opinions or approval of people. You can walk in integrity, make decisions with courage, and stand firm in your convictions, because your sustenance does not come from human acceptance. Another danger of relying on worldly systems is the illusion of control. People often believe that as long as they follow the rules of the system, work hard, save money, invest wisely, they will be secure. While discipline and wisdom are important, control is always limited. One unexpected crisis can wipe out years of planning. One global event can alter the entire structure of economies. Relying on control through systems alone leads to constant anxiety, because deep down, people know they cannot control everything. Trusting God, however, replaces anxiety with peace, because you acknowledge that while you are responsible for your part, He is in control of the outcome. Shifting dependence from man to God also brings joy back into life. When you depend solely on human systems, life feels like endless striving, always chasing, always competing, always fearing scarcity. But when you depend on God, you live from a place of rest. You work, but you work with peace. You plan, but you plan without panic. You live, but you live with assurance that whatever comes, you will be sustained. This posture of trust transforms the way you experience life. Every blessing is sweeter because you know it came from the hand of God. Every challenge is lighter because you know it is not the final word. Recognizing that dependence on man and systems brings limitations and disappointment is not meant to breed cynicism, but wisdom. It is meant to open your eyes to the reality that only God is unchanging, only God is limitless, and only God is faithful through every season. People may bless you, but they may also fail you. Systems may serve you, but they may also collapse. God alone is constant. When your trust rests fully in Him, you can engage with the world without fear, live with people without unrealistic expectations, and move through life with a steady heart. The freedom that comes from this shift cannot be overstated. You no longer wake up wondering if people will come through for you, because you know God will. You no longer live chained to the ups and downs of the economy, because you know heaven's resources are unlimited. You no longer live crushed by disappointment, because you see it as redirection, not abandonment. This truth anchors your soul in stability, allowing you to live with courage, generosity, and peace, no matter what the world looks like around you. Trust in God opens the door to unlimited divine supply. This is a principle that underpins every area of a fulfilled and abundant life. When you place your trust fully in God, you are essentially acknowledging that He is the source of all that you need, that He is faithful, and that His wisdom and timing surpass anything you could orchestrate on your own. Trust is not passive, it is an active posture of the heart, a conscious decision to align yourself with the provision, guidance, and love of God. When trust is genuine, it removes the barriers of fear, doubt, and anxiety that often block the flow of divine blessings. Trust begins with belief, a deep, unwavering belief that God is who He says He is. He is the provider, the sustainer, the one who sees every need before it arises. Belief creates a foundation for trust, because when you truly believe in God's nature, it becomes natural to rely on Him. Trust does not come from understanding every circumstance or seeing every step ahead. It comes from confidence in God's character. The knowledge that He is loving, faithful, and powerful allows you to step into life with confidence, even when the path is unclear or challenges appear insurmountable. When trust opens the door to divine supply, it does so by removing internal obstacles. Fear and doubt act like locks on the door of abundance. When you worry about where your next meal will come from, about how bills will be paid, or about how opportunities will arrive, you are essentially closing the door through your thoughts and words. Trust, on the other hand, acts like a key. When you say, "I trust you, God, to provide for me," you are removing the barriers that prevent blessings from flowing freely. It is an act of faith that creates spiritual alignment, allowing divine provision to manifest in your life. Trust also requires patience. Divine supply operates on a timeline that is often different from our own. Human impatience can cause frustration or premature decisions that disrupt the flow of God's blessings. When trust is cultivated, you are willing to wait for God's perfect timing. You understand that delays are not denials. Sometimes waiting is necessary for preparation, growth, or positioning. Trust keeps the heart steady during these times, preventing fear from dictating decisions or causing unnecessary stress. The longer the trust, the stronger the faith, and the more evident the provision becomes when it arrives. Another essential aspect of trust is obedience. Trust is not merely passive reliance. It is active cooperation with God's instructions and guidance. When God directs your steps, trust prompts you to follow, even when the path seems uncertain. Following God's guidance ensures that the supply He provides is fully received and utilized as intended. Trust without obedience may result in blessings being missed, delayed, or misused. Divine supply flows seamlessly when trust is paired with action that aligns with God's will, creating a synergy between faith and purpose. Trust also fosters peace of mind. One of the most profound effects of trusting God is the release of anxiety. When your heart is anchored in Him, you are no longer shaken by temporary setbacks or apparent shortages. Peace is the natural outcome of trusting that God will supply everything necessary for your success, well-being, and growth. This peace allows you to operate from a position of clarity rather than desperation. Decisions are made with wisdom, relationships are approached with grace, and opportunities are pursued with confidence, all because the heart is at rest in God's provision. Faith-filled trust also attracts divine opportunities. When you trust in God, you become more aware of the ways He is already working in your life. Opportunities, ideas, resources, and people align in ways that appear as blessings. It is not coincidence. It is the manifestation of God's supply flowing through channels of trust. Those who trust Him are more receptive to His guidance, more open to recognizing opportunities that others might overlook, and more willing to act on the inspiration that comes from the Spirit. Trust positions you to receive blessings fully, rather than partially, and to act upon them without hesitation. Trust in God also protects you from discouragement. Life is full of trials, obstacles, and apparent failures. Without trust, setbacks can feel like the end, leading to fear, despair, and self-reliance. But when trust is firmly rooted in God, you understand that temporary circumstances do not define ultimate provision. Every challenge becomes an opportunity for God to demonstrate His faithfulness. Trust shifts your focus from the problem to the provider, allowing you to remain steadfast and hopeful, even when outcomes are delayed or different from what you anticipated. Words play a powerful role in trust. Speaking faith-filled declarations reinforces belief and aligns your spirit with God's promises. Saying, "I trust you, Lord, to provide for me," or "God is my provider, and I lack nothing," is not empty repetition. It is an active expression of trust that strengthens your connection to divine supply. Words carry authority and help solidify a mindset that recognizes God as the ultimate source. They act as affirmations that keep your heart focused on His goodness, removing doubts that may otherwise hinder the flow of blessings. Trust also inspires generosity. When you truly believe that God will supply all your needs, you are free to give without fear. You give not from scarcity, but from abundance. You share your time, resources, and talents, knowing that God's supply is inexhaustible. Generosity fueled by trust not only blesses others, but it also activates the principle of divine reciprocity. God's blessings continue to flow back into your life. Trust creates a cycle where faith, obedience, and generosity interact to produce ongoing provision. It is important to recognize that trust must be consistent. Occasional trust or sporadic belief is not enough to fully open the door to God's unlimited supply. Trust must be cultivated daily through prayer, meditation, reflection on God's past faithfulness, and consistent alignment with His will. The more trust is exercised, the stronger it becomes, and the more naturally provision flows. Consistent trust creates an internal posture of expectation rather than doubt, of assurance rather than fear, and of openness rather than limitation. Trust also transforms perspective. When you rely on God, you begin to see situations differently. Challenges are no longer dead ends. They are opportunities for God's provision to be revealed. Limited resources are no longer reasons for despair. They are invitations to witness His abundance. Even failures are reframed as steps in the process of His provision. Trust reshapes the lens through which you experience life, turning obstacles into platforms for divine blessing. Trusting God is the key that unlocks unlimited divine supply. It connects the heart, mind, and spirit to the eternal source. It removes fear, cultivates peace, attracts opportunities, protects against discouragement, inspires generosity, and aligns your actions with His will. Trust transforms waiting into expectation, scarcity into abundance, and uncertainty into confident assurance. The moment you place your full trust in God, the door to limitless provision swings wide open, and you step into a life of faith, peace, and continual blessing. God cares for all creation, sparrows, lilies, nature, and cares even more for His children. This truth is both simple and profound, and it carries with it a reassurance that cannot be overstated. When we observe the world around us, we see evidence of God's meticulous attention to detail. Every bird in the sky, every flower in the field, every wave in the ocean, and every star in the heavens exists in perfect order and harmony. None of it is random. None of it is neglected. The Creator who sustains all of nature does so with precision, care, and consistency. And if His attention is this thorough in the natural world, how much more deliberate and tender is His care for humanity, who is made in His own image. Consider the sparrow. It is small, vulnerable, and easily overlooked. Yet Scripture teaches that not one sparrow falls to the ground outside the notice of God. If He notices something so seemingly insignificant, it demonstrates a level of care that transcends human understanding. God's attention is not limited by size, importance, or visibility. Every detail is observed. Every need is recognized. The same God who provides for these little creatures provides for you. He sees the intricacies of your life, the challenges you face, and the desires of your heart. No circumstance is too small or too complex for His attention, and nothing is outside His care. The lilies of the field also serve as a powerful example. They do not toil or spin, yet they are beautifully clothed and adorned in splendor beyond human craftsmanship. If God cares so fully for the flowers that bloom for a brief season, clothing them in beauty that surpasses even the most elaborate creations of man, then surely His provision for His children, made in His image and bearing eternal significance, will be even more abundant, precise, and loving. Nature operates under God's care, and humanity operates under His greater concern. The natural world serves as a living illustration of the meticulous, abundant, and faithful care that flows from His heart. Understanding this care brings a profound sense of peace. Anxiety often arises because people feel unseen, overlooked, or abandoned. But when you grasp that God cares for every detail of creation, including you, anxiety loses its power. You realize that nothing escapes His notice, and nothing is too trivial to be important to Him. The storms of life, the challenges, the uncertainties, none of these are beyond his attention. This awareness instills confidence and trust. You can face the unknown not with fear, but with the assurance that the one who holds the universe also holds your life, and nothing escapes his providential care. This care is not limited to observation, it is active. God does not merely notice, he provides, just as he feeds the birds, waters the plants, and sustains the ecosystems of the earth. He sustains every area of human life. Provision is an extension of his care. Your needs, physical, emotional, spiritual, and relational, are known to him before you even speak them. He provides guidance when you are confused, strength when you are weary, opportunities when doors appear closed, and encouragement when discouragement threatens to take hold. The Creator who sustains all creation is personally involved in sustaining your life, and his provision is a reflection of his heart's care. The magnitude of God's care becomes even more evident when considering the consistency with which it is expressed. The sun rises faithfully, the rain falls in its appointed season, and the natural world continues its rhythm without interruption. Similarly, God's care for his children is unwavering. It does not fluctuate with circumstances, but continuous and holistic, impacting every area of existence and fostering growth, fulfillment, and alignment with God's eternal purposes. Patience is a fundamental aspect of experiencing God's perfect provision. Many people struggle with waiting, believing that delays indicate a lack of care or an absence of blessings. Yet divine provision operates according to a timeline that often differs from human expectations. Patience is not passive. It is an active, conscious choice to trust God's timing and to remain steadfast while unseen forces work behind the scenes. It is the practice of holding faith steady, even when circumstances appear stagnant, and maintaining a posture of expectation rather than frustration. Understanding patience as a spiritual discipline allows one to align more fully with the flow of God's provision and to receive blessings in their perfect form and timing. Waiting tests faith, yet it also strengthens it. When needs or desires are unmet, the heart has an opportunity to learn reliance on God rather than on human effort alone. Patience teaches the believer to resist the urge to force outcomes through worry, anxiety, or rash decisions. Each moment of waiting is an invitation to deepen trust, to reflect on past experiences of provision, and to cultivate confidence that God's timing is perfect. The longer the heart can wait without wavering, the stronger faith becomes, and the more fully provision can manifest when it arrives. Patience requires perspective. Human vision is limited to the immediate moment, often making delays appear as denials or obstacles. Divine vision, however, encompasses the entire unfolding of life, seeing the purpose, preparation, and positioning that occur before blessings are realized. When one exercises patience, it is a recognition that there is a greater plan at work. Delays may serve as preparation for future opportunities, as refinement of character, or as alignment of circumstances in ways that human eyes cannot yet perceive. By trusting in this broader perspective, the believer can remain steady, confident, and hopeful during periods of waiting. Patience is closely linked to trust. Without trust, waiting becomes anxiety-filled and restless. When the heart believes in God's faithfulness, patience becomes possible. Trust provides the assurance that needs will be met, even if the timing or form differs from expectation. This trust acts as a stabilizing force, preventing doubt from dictating behavior and allowing one to continue faithfully pursuing responsibilities, opportunities, and growth while waiting. In this way, patience is both an expression of faith and a cultivator of deeper trust. During periods of waiting, patience encourages reflection and gratitude. Instead of focusing on absence or scarcity, the heart can turn toward what has already been provided. Reflecting on past experiences of divine provision reinforces faith and builds confidence that God will continue to act. Gratitude during waiting transforms perspective, turning periods that might feel stagnant into moments of awareness, appreciation, and preparation. This practice strengthens the connection between the believer and God, creating a fertile environment for provision to arrive in fullness. Patience also cultivates resilience. Life is unpredictable, and challenges often emerge that require endurance. When provision is delayed or comes in unexpected ways, a patient heart is better equipped to respond constructively. It resists despair, frustration, or rash action, instead maintaining a focus on what can be learned, how character can be strengthened, and how alignment with God's will can be maintained. This resilience ensures that when blessings do arrive, the heart is ready to receive them fully and utilize them wisely. Patience is expressed through consistent action aligned with God's guidance. Waiting does not mean inactivity, it involves preparation, obedience, and stewardship. While trusting God's timing, the believer continues to take appropriate steps, work diligently, and respond to opportunities that align with divine direction. These actions, performed with patience, ensure that provision is not missed due to idleness or lack of readiness. Patience and action work in tandem, creating a dynamic that positions the believer to receive blessings effectively. Another dimension of patience is emotional discipline. Waiting often triggers anxiety, impatience, or negative emotions. Exercising patience involves maintaining calm, cultivating peace, and resisting the tendency to react impulsively to delays. Emotional discipline ensures that the heart remains receptive to divine provision, rather than closed by frustration or fear. By mastering the inner landscape of emotions during waiting, the believer strengthens both faith and spiritual sensitivity, making the arrival of blessings smoother and more transformative. Patience encourages long-term vision. Many desires and needs are part of a broader divine plan that unfolds gradually. Impatience can lead to premature decisions, settling for less, or pursuing solutions that are misaligned with ultimate purpose. Patience, on the other hand, allows the believer to consider the bigger picture, to wait for opportunities that are perfectly suited, and to recognize that divine timing often surpasses human expectation in both quality and impact. By embracing long-term vision, patience ensures that provision arrives in a form that maximizes benefit and aligns with God's wisdom. Patience nurtures humility. Waiting reminds the believer that not everything is within human control and that dependence on God is essential. It cultivates a recognition of personal limitations and encourages reliance on divine wisdom rather than self-effort alone. Humility softens the heart, making it receptive to guidance, instruction, and opportunities that might otherwise be overlooked. In this way, patience is not merely the act of waiting, it is a cultivation of character that aligns the believer with God's perfect provision. Patience also enhances discernment. During periods of waiting, the heart and mind are given the opportunity to evaluate options, consider timing, and refine understanding. This discernment ensures that when provision arrives, it is recognized and acted upon appropriately. Impulsive actions often result in missed blessings or ineffective use of resources. Patience allows for careful observation, thoughtful reflection, and wise decision-making, all of which enhance the effectiveness and impact of God's provision. Patience strengthens relationships and interactions with others. Waiting often requires tolerance, empathy, and understanding, whether it is for the fulfillment of personal goals, the resolution of conflict, or the timing of collaborative opportunities. A patient heart interacts with others more graciously, communicates more effectively, and navigates challenges with wisdom and composure. These relational qualities create environments in which divine provision is more likely to manifest and be shared, extending blessings beyond the individual to those around them. Patience encourages hope and expectation. Even when delays persist, the heart of a patient believer remains expectant. It does not despair or resign itself to lack. Instead, it maintains confidence that God is actively at work, orchestrating circumstances and preparing the path for provision. Hope sustained by patience ensures that the believer remains motivated, focused, and aligned with divine purpose, creating conditions in which blessings can be received fully and joyfully. Patience is also transformative. The act of waiting cultivates maturity, depth of character, and spiritual strength. It teaches reliance on God, the value of trust, and the importance of aligning actions with divine guidance. Through patience, the believer is prepared to steward blessings wisely, to exercise discernment, and to respond to provision with gratitude and humility. Delays, rather than being seen as obstacles, become tools of preparation, shaping the individual to receive greater abundance in a way that maximizes both impact and purpose. Patience ensures that provision is not only received but experienced in its fullness. By trusting the timing, embracing waiting, and maintaining alignment with God's will, the believer allows blessings to manifest completely, avoiding the pitfalls of premature or partial reception. Patience transforms waiting from a period of frustration into a season of preparation, growth, and expectation, ensuring that when provision arrives, it is perfect in timing, sufficient in scope, and aligned with the divine plan. Through the practice of patience, the believer learns to wait with confidence, to trust without wavering, and to embrace delays as opportunities for growth and preparation. Patience strengthens faith, cultivates resilience, enhances discernment, nurtures humility, and fosters gratitude. It transforms the experience of waiting into a dynamic period of alignment with God's will, ensuring that His provision is received fully, effectively, and in a manner that maximizes both personal and spiritual growth. Persistence is an essential quality in receiving God's perfect provision, yet it is often overlooked or misunderstood. Many people give up too quickly when faced with challenges, delays, or setbacks, believing that obstacles indicate a lack of favor or a closed door. Divine provision, however, is not always immediate. It often requires steadfastness, endurance, and continued action in alignment with God's guidance. Persistence is the discipline of continuing faithfully toward a goal, trusting that God's timing and wisdom are perfect, even when circumstances suggest otherwise. It is not mere stubbornness but a deliberate choice to remain aligned with faith, purpose, and divine direction, creating the conditions through which provision flows freely and abundantly. Persistence begins with clarity of purpose. Knowing what one seeks, why it matters, and how it aligns with God's will provides motivation to continue despite challenges. Without a clear sense of purpose, obstacles can easily derail effort, and discouragement can take hold. Persistence requires a vision anchored in faith, an understanding that the desired provision is part of God's plan, and that steadfast effort is necessary to realize it. This clarity transforms persistence from mere effort into a spiritually guided practice, ensuring that energy is applied purposefully and in alignment with divine intention. Faith fuels persistence. Without trust in God's character and promises, endurance falters. Faith provides the conviction that God is actively at work, orchestrating circumstances, preparing opportunities, and arranging resources in perfect timing. Persistence without faith often becomes mechanical, relying solely on human willpower, and may eventually burn out. Faith-infused persistence, on the other hand, is resilient, hopeful, and confident, understanding that setbacks are temporary, challenges are opportunities, and provision will arrive according to God's plan. Each step taken in faith reinforces the belief that effort aligned with divine guidance produces results, even if the outcomes are not immediately visible. Persistence requires action. Waiting passively or hoping for blessings without effort does not cultivate provision. God's provision often flows through the cooperation of human effort aligned with His will. Persistence manifests in consistent, deliberate action, whether it involves pursuing opportunities, developing skills, building relationships, or stewarding resources wisely. Each act of persistent effort demonstrates readiness to receive, positions one for opportunity, and aligns with God's natural and spiritual principles. Action, guided by faith and reinforced by persistence, creates momentum that allows divine supply to intersect with human endeavor. Resilience is a natural companion to persistence. Life inevitably presents challenges, disappointments, and obstacles. Persistence is the ability to continue despite these difficulties, to recover quickly from setbacks, and to maintain focus on the ultimate goal. Resilience ensures that obstacles do not become permanent barriers or sources of discouragement. It allows the believer to view challenges as temporary, to learn from them, and to adapt strategies without losing sight of the desired provision. This combination of persistence and resilience strengthens character, deepens faith, and maximizes the impact of blessings when they arrive. Patience and persistence are closely intertwined. While patience involves trusting God's timing, persistence involves continuing faithfully until provision manifests. Both qualities require faith, self-control, and a long-term perspective. Patience prevents frustration and impulsive decisions, while persistence ensures that effort continues despite waiting periods. Together, they create a balance that aligns human action with divine timing, ensuring that blessings are not only received but experienced fully and in accordance with God's plan. Persistence also fosters creativity and problem-solving. Obstacles often require new approaches, alternative strategies, or innovative thinking. A persistent heart does not give up when the first path is blocked. It seeks solutions, adapts to circumstances, and remains flexible while staying aligned with the ultimate goal. This openness allows provision to manifest in ways that might not have been anticipated initially, revealing new opportunities and resources that enhance the outcome. Divine provision often works through persistence-enhanced ingenuity, producing results that surpass initial expectations. Persistence strengthens character. The act of continuing faithfully in the face of difficulty cultivates virtues such as diligence, courage, discipline, and integrity. These qualities are essential not only for receiving provision, but also for stewarding it effectively. God's blessings are often entrusted to those who have demonstrated the ability to endure, remain faithful, and act responsibly. Through persistent effort, the believer develops the spiritual and practical capacity to receive, manage, and multiply provision in alignment with divine purpose. Persistence nurtures hope and expectation. When effort is consistent, even in the midst of delays or setbacks, the heart remains expectant rather than despairing. Hope is sustained by the belief that God's promises are true and that His provision will manifest. This expectation generates energy, focus, and motivation, ensuring that effort continues and opportunities are not overlooked. Hope, fueled by persistence, transforms waiting and struggle into a proactive stance, allowing the believer to participate fully in the unfolding of divine supply. Persistence also encourages accountability and responsibility. Continued effort requires self-discipline, planning, and organization. It involves recognizing the role of personal action in conjunction with divine intervention. This balance between human responsibility and reliance on God cultivates maturity, wisdom, and discernment. The believer learns to identify when to act, when to wait, and how to steward resources effectively, ensuring that provision is maximized and utilized for its intended purpose. Persistence strengthens relationships and networks. Many forms of provision come through collaboration, mentorship, and the support of others. Persistent effort demonstrates reliability, commitment, and integrity, fostering trust and encouraging others to engage, support, and participate in shared opportunities. By persisting in relationships, communication, and collaboration, the believer positions themselves to receive provision not only directly from God, but also indirectly through the cooperation and generosity of others. The act of persistence also builds spiritual sensitivity. As effort continues, the heart becomes more attuned to guidance, subtle cues, and divine direction. Challenges and delays provide opportunities to discern lessons, recognize unseen interventions, and adjust strategies in alignment with God's will. This spiritual attunement ensures that provision is not only pursued, but recognized and acted upon when it becomes available. The combination of persistence and spiritual sensitivity creates a fertile environment for blessings to manifest in ways that are timely, sufficient, and aligned with divine purpose. Persistence develops resilience against discouragement and doubt. Challenges, setbacks, and opposition are inevitable in any pursuit. A heart committed to persistence maintains focus, confidence, and trust, despite external pressures or internal fears. By refusing to be derailed, the believer demonstrates readiness to receive blessings and prepares the character to steward them responsibly. Persistence transforms adversity from a source of frustration into a mechanism for growth, refining faith and deepening trust in God's provision. Persistence, when exercised in alignment with faith, obedience, and patience, creates a powerful synergy. Faith fuels trust, obedience directs action, patience maintains alignment with God's timing, and persistence ensures continuous effort. Together, these qualities form a spiritual framework through which provision flows consistently and abundantly. Without persistence, even the most faithful, obedient, and patient individuals may miss opportunities simply because they ceased to pursue them before fulfillment arrived. Persistence ensures the completion and full realization of God's provision. Initial blessings may be partial, incremental, or preparatory. Persistent effort allows these blessings to grow, multiply, and reach their intended impact. It ensures that divine supply is not only accessed, but integrated fully into life, producing lasting transformation, abundance, and alignment with God's purposes. Persistence, therefore, is not merely a human virtue, it is a spiritual principle that opens the door for divine provision to be experienced in its completeness, enriching every area of life and preparing the heart for even greater blessing. Through the practice of persistence, the believer learns to endure, act faithfully, adapt creatively, and maintain hope in the face of delay. It strengthens character, fosters resilience, enhances discernment, nurtures relationships, and aligns effort with divine timing. Persistence transforms challenges into opportunities, ensures readiness to receive, and allows God's perfect provision to manifest fully, creating a life marked by abundance, faithfulness, and fulfillment. Generosity is a vital principle in accessing and experiencing God's perfect provision. It is often misunderstood as simply giving material resources or sharing wealth. But true generosity is a broader expression of the heart that encompasses time, attention, encouragement, wisdom, and service. Generosity is a conscious choice to reflect God's abundance by sharing what has been entrusted to us, recognizing that all provision ultimately comes from Him. When practiced consistently and sincerely, generosity becomes a powerful channel through which blessings flow, creating a cycle of abundance, trust, and divine favor that touches every area of life. Generosity begins with the recognition of God as the ultimate source of all provision. Everything we have, talent, time, resources, relationships, is entrusted to us for stewardship. Understanding this truth fosters a mindset of abundance rather than scarcity. When the heart acknowledges that provision is not limited or finite, it naturally becomes inclined toward giving. Generosity is not motivated by compulsion or guilt, but by the joyful recognition that sharing reflects God's nature and aligns human action with divine will. This awareness transforms giving into a spiritual act, one that both honors God and cultivates a fertile ground for further blessings. Generosity cultivates a spirit of gratitude. When individuals give, they are acknowledging the blessings they have already received, expressing thanks through action, This act of gratitude reinforces faith by demonstrating trust in God's continued care. Each act of giving is a declaration that what has been provided is sufficient and that future provision is assured. In this way, generosity and gratitude work in tandem. Gratitude inspires giving, and giving reinforces appreciation and recognition of divine abundance. True generosity requires selflessness. It involves prioritizing the needs of others, often above immediate personal desires, while trusting that God's provision will continue to supply what is necessary. This selflessness is not about neglecting personal responsibility, but about cultivating a heart that recognizes the interdependence of humanity and the flow of God's blessings. By putting others first, individuals participate in the divine economy of abundance, where giving becomes a conduit for multiplied blessings, both for the giver and for those who receive. Generosity opens the heart to receive. There is a profound spiritual principle at work. The more freely one gives, the more abundant provision returns. This is not simply a transactional law, but a reflection of the way divine supply functions. A generous heart signals readiness to participate in God's flow, creating alignment between human action and divine intention. As generosity becomes habitual, it removes barriers of fear, selfishness, or scarcity, allowing the believer to receive provision fully and without resistance. Generosity strengthens relationships. By giving of oneself, whether through resources, encouragement, or support, trust and goodwill are cultivated. Relationships built on generosity often create networks of mutual support and opportunity, positioning individuals to receive not only direct provision from God, but also indirect blessings through the cooperation and encouragement of generosity fosters a community-oriented mindset, ensuring that provision circulates and multiplies rather than remaining stagnant or self-contained. Generosity requires discernment. Giving indiscriminately, without wisdom or strategy, can lead to depletion or inefficiency. True generosity involves prayerful consideration, guided by spiritual discernment, of how to share resources in ways that produce lasting impact. It requires understanding both immediate needs and long-term consequences, ensuring that blessings are utilized effectively and align with God's purpose. Discernment ensures that generosity is not merely a reactive act, but a thoughtful, strategic, and spiritually guided practice. Generosity also nurtures humility. By recognizing that all provision originates from God, and that sharing is a reflection of His abundance, the heart remains humble. Humility prevents pride from tainting acts of giving, and ensures that generosity is motivated by love, gratitude, and alignment with divine principles, rather than by a desire for recognition or reward. A humble heart is receptive to God's guidance, able to receive provision without arrogance, and inclined to bless others without expectation of return. Generosity encourages faith. Acts of giving often require stepping out of comfort zones, or trusting God to supply what is needed afterward. This faith is an active expression of trust in God's provision and His ability to replenish and sustain. Every act of generosity becomes an opportunity to exercise confidence in divine care, reinforcing the principle that provision is abundant, continuous, and reliable. The more one practices faith-driven generosity, the more one experiences the fullness of God's blessings. Generosity has a multiplying effect. Small acts of kindness, sharing, or giving often produce outcomes that far exceed initial expectations. When provision is shared, it not only meets immediate needs, but also generates ripple effects that can impact multiple lives, often in unforeseen ways. Divine principles ensure that blessings are multiplied through acts of generosity, creating a cycle where giving produces abundance that is then reinvested into further acts of giving and stewardship. This multiplication demonstrates the expansive nature of God's provision, which grows when aligned with selfless action. Generosity strengthens character. The act of giving, particularly when it requires sacrifice or effort, builds virtues such as patience, self-control, courage, and empathy. These qualities are essential for stewarding provision wisely, ensuring that blessings are not squandered, but used in ways that honor God and benefit others. By cultivating generosity, the believer develops moral and spiritual capacity to handle increasing responsibility, reinforcing the alignment between action, intention, and divine blessing. Generosity nurtures joy. The heart that gives freely experiences fulfillment, satisfaction, and happiness that transcends material gain. This joy is a reflection of alignment with God's nature and an acknowledgement of His abundance. Generosity fosters a positive feedback loop. Giving produces joy, joy enhances gratitude, and gratitude opens the heart to receive more. In this way, generosity is both an expression of love and a source of emotional and spiritual enrichment, reinforcing the flow of divine provision in all areas of life. Generosity also teaches stewardship. Provision is not merely to be consumed, it is entrusted for purposeful use. By practicing generosity, individuals learn to manage resources wisely, allocate them strategically, and ensure that they are used for meaningful, constructive, and spiritually aligned purposes. Stewardship ensures that provision is not only received but multiplied, sustaining a cycle of abundance that impacts both the individual and the wider community. Generosity encourages reliance on God, rather than fear of lack. Giving requires the trust that God will replenish what is shared, that needs will continue to be met, and that provision is sufficient to support both the giver and the recipient. This reliance fosters a mindset of abundance rather than scarcity, reducing anxiety, worry, and selfishness. Generosity rooted in trust transforms giving from a calculated risk into a spiritual practice that enhances faith and aligns human action with divine wisdom. Generosity strengthens spiritual sensitivity. A generous heart is more attuned to the needs of others, more receptive to guidance, and more aware of opportunities to serve. This heightened awareness ensures that provision is not hoarded or wasted, but flows to where it can have the greatest impact. Spiritual sensitivity also allows the believer to recognize subtle forms of provision, understand timing, and respond in alignment with God's broader purposes. Generosity creates a culture of blessing. By consistently sharing resources, time, and care, the believer participates in a divine ecosystem of provision. Blessings flow not only to the individual, but circulate through relationships, communities, and networks, producing cumulative effects that expand far beyond initial acts. Generosity transforms life into a conduit of divine abundance, demonstrating the principle that what is shared returns multiplied in unexpected and extraordinary ways. Generosity fosters a deeper connection with God. Each act of giving is an acknowledgement of His care, faithfulness, and abundance. It reflects alignment with His nature and participation in His work in the world. By cultivating generosity as a consistent practice, the believer experiences provision not merely as a transaction, but as a living, dynamic relationship with the source of all blessings. Generosity ensures that provision is both received and shared, creating a life of abundance, purpose, and spiritual fulfillment. Through generosity, the believer aligns with divine principles, participates in the multiplication of blessings, strengthens character, nurtures joy, fosters humility, and experiences God's provision in its fullness. It transforms giving into a spiritual practice, opening channels for abundance in every area of life, and cultivating a heart that reflects God's nature, creating continuous cycles of blessing, growth, and divine favor. Faith is the cornerstone of experiencing God's perfect provision. It is not merely an abstract belief or wishful thinking. It is a deep, unwavering trust in God's character, promises, and ability to provide. Faith operates as both the foundation and the channel through which divine blessings flow. Without faith, provision may be offered but remains unclaimed or underutilized because the heart is not aligned to recognize, receive, and act upon what God has made available. Faith is active, dynamic, and relational, requiring trust, patience, persistence, and an expectation that God's wisdom surpasses human understanding. Faith begins with trust in God's character, recognizing that He is faithful, loving, wise, and generous forms the basis for confidence that needs will be met. This trust is not contingent on circumstances, appearances, or the timing of events. Even when challenges arise or resources appear insufficient, faith maintains the assurance that God is working behind the scenes, orchestrating every detail for the ultimate good of those who believe. It allows the believer to remain steadfast, secure in the knowledge that provision will manifest according to divine wisdom and purpose. Faith is relational. It is an ongoing dialogue between the believer and God, expressed through prayer, reflection, obedience, and surrender. In this relationship, the believer comes to understand the nature of God's provision, not only as material supply, but as spiritual, emotional, and relational enrichment. Faith deepens as one experiences God's guidance, protection, and intervention in daily life. Each answered prayer, every moment of provision, and each experience of divine care reinforces trust and strengthens the believer's confidence in his ability to provide fully and perfectly. Faith requires expectation. A heart that truly believes in God's provision anticipates blessing, rather than doubting its arrival. This expectation is not passive or naive. It is a confident awareness that God has already made provision, and that it will manifest at the appointed time. Expectation keeps the believer aligned with divine timing, ready to receive when opportunities appear, and motivated to act in accordance with guidance and inspiration. It transforms waiting from a period of anxiety into a season of preparation and growth, ensuring that provision is fully realized when it arrives. Faith motivates action. Divine provision is often accessed through human cooperation. Faith inspires obedience, persistence, and discernment, ensuring that the believer actively participates in the unfolding of blessings. Acts of faith-driven action demonstrate readiness, align behavior with divine guidance, and open the door for provision to flow effectively. Faith without action is incomplete. It must translate into practical steps that correspond with God's will, creating a partnership in which both divine wisdom and human initiative contribute to the realization of abundance. Faith sustains patience. Waiting is a natural part of life, and delays in provision can test resolve. Faith provides the anchor during these times, reinforcing the belief that God's timing is perfect and that every delay serves a purpose. It transforms waiting into an opportunity for spiritual growth, reflection, and alignment with divine purpose. Faith keeps the heart steady, preventing discouragement, impatience, or anxiety from undermining trust in God's provision. In this way, patience is a natural fruit of enduring faith, allowing provision to manifest fully and at the right moment. Faith also enhances discernment. A believer grounded in faith is better able to recognize divine guidance, perceive opportunities, and distinguish between fleeting desires and provision aligned with God's will. Discernment ensures that resources, time, and energy are directed toward endeavors that align with purpose and divine timing. It enables the believer to respond appropriately when provision arrives, ensuring that blessings are maximized, stewarded wisely, and utilized in ways that honor God and contribute to long-term growth and abundance. Faith interacts dynamically with gratitude. A faithful heart recognizes that all provision is a gift from God and expresses appreciation for what has already been received. Gratitude reinforces trust, deepens awareness of blessings, and amplifies the perception of provision. Faith and gratitude together create a cycle in which recognizing God's past faithfulness strengthens belief in His continued care. This dynamic fosters joy, contentment, and openness, preparing the heart to receive additional blessings and ensuring that provision is experienced fully rather than taken for granted. Faith empowers persistence. Challenges, obstacles, and setbacks are inevitable in any journey toward provision. Faith ensures that the believer continues to act, seek, and trust, even in the face of adversity. It sustains motivation, provides resilience, and prevents discouragement from disrupting progress. Persistent action, rooted in faith, ensures that opportunities are not missed, that efforts are aligned with divine guidance, and that provision is ultimately realized. Without faith, persistence can falter, but when combined with trust in God, it becomes a powerful force that opens the way for lasting abundance. Faith cultivates humility, recognizing that provision originates from God rather than human effort, fosters dependence on His wisdom, guidance, and generosity. Humility opens the heart to receive fully, accept guidance, and steward blessings wisely. It ensures that faith is not tainted by arrogance or self-reliance, and that provision is approached with gratitude, reverence, and responsible action. Humility nurtured by faith aligns human understanding with divine perspective, enhancing the effectiveness and impact of every blessing received. Faith strengthens hope, even in uncertain circumstances. A faithful heart maintains confidence that God's promises are true. Hope, rooted in faith, prevents despair and negativity from taking hold. It encourages proactive engagement with life, motivates positive action, and sustains vision during periods of waiting. Hope ensures that the believer remains open to opportunity, aligned with divine guidance, and receptive to provision when it manifests. In this way, faith and hope work together to maintain spiritual, emotional, and practical alignment with God's perfect plan. Faith also fosters generosity. Believing in God's abundance allows the believer to give freely, trusting that provision will continue. Acts of generosity are expressions of faith, demonstrating confidence in divine care and willingness to share blessings without fear of lack. Generosity fueled by faith creates a reciprocal flow of provision, multiplies blessings, and reflects God's nature in the world. It ensures that resources, time, and talents are used not only for personal benefit, but to bless others, creating a cycle of abundance and spiritual growth. Faith encourages obedience. Belief in God's guidance naturally leads to action in accordance with His will. Obedience is the tangible expression of faith, translating trust into practical steps that access provision. Each act of obedience strengthens faith, reinforces alignment with divine timing, and positions the believer to receive and utilize blessings effectively. Faith without obedience is theoretical, but faith expressed through action ensures that provision flows seamlessly and fully into life. Faith cultivates resilience and emotional stability. Challenges, disappointments, and uncertainties are inevitable in life. A faithful heart remains anchored, maintaining perspective and composure while trusting in God's ultimate plan. This resilience ensures that provision is not obstructed by fear, anxiety, or frustration, and allows the believer to navigate obstacles with clarity and confidence. Emotional stability, grounded in faith, supports consistent action, patient waiting, and wise decision-making, all of which are necessary to fully experience divine provision. Faith aligns human desire with divine purpose. When the heart trusts in God, priorities shift from fleeting or superficial goals to pursuits that reflect spiritual, relational, and purposeful abundance. This alignment ensures that provision is received in forms that are meaningful, beneficial, and consistent with long-term growth. Faith shapes not only the reception of blessings, but the discernment, utilization, and multiplication of those blessings, creating a life marked by abundance, impact, and fulfillment. Faith creates an open channel for continuous provision. It ensures that the believer is prepared to recognize, receive, and act upon blessings as they arrive. Faith transforms provision from a sporadic occurrence into a dynamic, ongoing experience, reinforcing the principles of gratitude, obedience, persistence, generosity, patience, and hope. Through faith, divine supply is not only accessed but integrated fully into life, producing tangible and lasting results in spiritual, emotional, relational, and material dimensions. Through the practice of faith, the believer experiences God's provision as abundant, timely, and perfectly aligned with purpose. Faith strengthens trust, fosters perseverance, cultivates humility, enhances discernment, nurtures hope, encourages generosity, and sustains obedience. It transforms waiting into preparation, obstacles into opportunities, and blessings into tools for growth and impact. Faith ensures that God's perfect provision is not only received, but experienced fully, creating a life marked by alignment with divine wisdom, fulfillment, and continuous abundance. As we draw this message to its conclusion, remember that God's perfect provision is not a distant promise, it is a present reality, accessible to every heart, willing to trust, obey, and align with His will. Every principle we have explored, faith, obedience, patience, persistence, gratitude, and generosity, is a key that opens the door to abundance, fulfillment, and divine favor. When you embrace these truths, you are not merely hoping for blessings, you are stepping into a life where provision flows naturally, consistently, and in perfect alignment with God's timing and purpose. Your role is not passive. You are called to trust deeply, act faithfully, give generously, wait patiently, and persist unwaveringly. Each step you take in alignment with these principles strengthens your connection to the source of all blessings and positions you to receive more than you could ever imagine. The universe responds to the vibration of faith-filled action, and God's supply is ever ready to meet the needs of a heart that is prepared, open, and expectant. As you leave this place of reflection, carry with you the confidence that no situation is beyond God's provision. Scarcity is a mindset. Abundance is a reality for those who believe. Challenges are opportunities in disguise, waiting for the steadfast, obedient, and faithful heart to unlock their hidden treasures. Your life can be a living testimony of God's generosity, a beacon of hope, and a channel of blessing for others, reflecting the perfect harmony of divine care and human alignment. Step forward today with courage, faith, and expectation. Trust that what you need has already been made available, and that every principle you apply, faith, obedience, patience, persistence, and generosity, brings you closer to the full manifestation of God's perfect provision. Receive it, steward it wisely, and watch as your life transforms in ways that surpass human understanding. God is ready, your heart is prepared, and your provision is already on its way. Believe it, embrace it, and live in the fullness of His abundance.